Right, so Keir Starmer's resignation woes are getting even worse, following the departure of former Scottish Labour MSP Neil Findlay earlier this week, as reported on by this channel. And in a show of just how bad things are actually getting for Team Keith, we only actually need to look at one other council as an example of the scale of collapse that is going on in what is seen broadly as a staunch Labour right heartland. So those leaving, not necessarily of the left particularly at all, and how the Labour group there is now utterly imploding, and all less than a year after they were all elected to their posts at that. This one council is acting as a signpost for how things are also reportedly falling apart for Labour before we even get to this year's local elections elsewhere in the country as well, widely expected to be absolutely catastrophic for Starmer's Labour, given all of the mandateless attacks on the elderly, children and the disabled that they have come out with, all to fund more defence spending and to hand billions to Ukraine and to provide cover for Rachel Reeves's economic ineptitude. And whilst the resignation of the Labour group leader on this council might have garnered some mainstream media attention, damaging enough in and of itself you might think, his departure is only a fraction of the full story there.
After 41 years membership of the Labour Party, I feel I have no alternative if I want to be true to the principles that got me elected, other than to stand down as leader of Dudley Labour Group and ultimately to leave the Labour Party.
And you've come to this decision after the announcement on welfare that we had earlier this week. What was it in that was so unpalatable for you? So
literally 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was in the council chamber in Dudley condemning the Conservative Party locally for instigating cuts on the most vulnerable people in our society. I couldn't be true to my own principles, to my own beliefs, to not then also be consistent to the party that I've been a member of for 41 years. So if I can condemn the impact on vulnerable people locally in Dudley, I have to be consistent to my beliefs and condemn the government that are attacking the most vulnerable people.
What is it that so worries you in there that we saw announced by Liz Kendall?
Well, firstly, it's the rhetoric, the stigmatisation of some of the most vulnerable people. The ward I represent proudly for 20 years has some of the most challenging communities within that. And to see them being stigmatised in the way that I've seen the government do that, they are not core to the Labour values of what I joined the party of 41 years ago, a party of tolerance, equality and inclusion. And I don't believe that I am leaving the Labour Party. I passionately believe that the Labour Party left me some time ago, and it's heartbreaking.
Right, so that was the now former Labour group leader, now independent councillor on Dudley Council, Peter Lowe, a Labour member of 41 years, explaining exactly why not only he has resigned from the Labour group on that council, but has resigned entirely from the Labour Party. Lowe's departure is not merely a localised event, but a symptom of a broader crisis across the country now within the Labour Party, all down to Keir Starmer's, well, let's call it leadership to be generous, and down to Keir Starmer himself as well. Lowe's resignation, followed by that of 3 more Labour councillors this week, Matt Cook, Peter Drake and Carl Denning, all quitting the Labour group and party as well, highlights growing discontent within the party around the country. It is an example of that, particularly over its stance on disability benefit cuts. This wave of resignations, coupled with the expulsion last month of another Dudley Labour councillor, Steve Edwards, for criticising Starmer, his only crime, which itself prompted yet another resignation from another councillor, has left the Labour group in Dudley in complete disarray. Now this group of 6 former Labour councillors is preparing to form an independent group to oppose both the Tory-run council and the diminished Labour group on Dudley Council, all in having severe implications for Keir Starmer's leadership and the broader risks facing that and his Labour Party across the country that they have only brought on themselves, and some of which I will come on to in a moment as well. Let's start with the more high-profile bit of the story first, though, and go from there, which is Peter Lowe's resignation as leader of the Dudley Labour Group and his departure from the Labour Party after more than 4 decades of membership, which has sent shockwaves through the local area and the local Labour Party. Lowe has, of course, cited the party's shift away from its core values as the primary reason for his decision. In particular, he has expressed deep dissatisfaction with the Labour Party's support for cuts to disability benefits. He'd only recently attacked the Tories over that very same subject, as he said in that piece of video a moment ago. Widely attacked around the country, as Labour is now, as inexcusably cruel, and is absolutely a betrayal of the party's commitment to social justice, one of its foundations. An excerpt from the Morning Star makes Lowe's feelings even more clear on this. Announcing the decision, Dudley councillor Pete Lowe wrote, "I always believed I could better serve my community from within the Labour Party. I no longer believe that is the case under Keir Starmer's leadership. The National Party is not only attacking the most vulnerable in society, but silencing voices within the party who dare to speak up. First they came for the pensioners and our children, and now they are coming for the sick, vulnerable and disabled. I cannot attack the Tories in Dudley for cutting support for the most vulnerable, while staying silent when the government does the same. The Labour Party has never been perfect, but it always offered a voice for working people. Unfortunately, I no longer feel this is the case." And he's right. It no longer represents workers. They put themselves forward as a party of work now. Therefore, they're on the side of the bosses and no longer the workers. Lowe's resignation has been quickly followed by 3 more Labour councillors, as I alluded to a moment ago, Matt Cook, Peter Drake and Carl Denning, who echoed Lowe's concerns about the party's direction. Drake, for instance, who represents the Cosley ward, accused the government and the National Labour leadership of attacking the people they are meant to represent. They're undermining our country, and we cannot defend that. Principles matter. Carl Denning went even further, having been quoted in the local press. Councillor Denning, who represents Castle and Priory ward, said he expected 1 or 2 more councillors to follow suit in the coming days. He said the anger was with the Labour government and not with the group on the council. It all stems from the welfare reforms they want to do. We are just not happy, he said. We are not happy with the language they are using. We are not happy they are going to cut the disability benefits before they cut anything else. We just decided it wasn't the party we joined. All of this blowing up this week, however, isn't even the start of the crisis in Dudley Labour. It's just deepened now. Last month, the local party was on the receiving end of Starmer's epic petulance through the expulsion of Steve Edwards for publicly criticising Keir Starmer, because how dare he, having made public a letter he had sent to Starmer asking him to do more to help ordinary people. Well, heaven forbid the Labour Party represent the working class, eh? Starmer doesn't care about ordinary people, he never has, but to expel a sitting councillor from his party for daring to ask? Frankly, it should have created a lot more noise than it did. Nevertheless, his expulsion, which is heavy-handed and politically motivated as it clearly comes across, matters went further. You see, Edwards' expulsion had a bit of a ripple effect, which led to the resignation of Karen Westwood, another Labour councillor on Dudley Council. Her resignation in solidarity with Edwards underscores the feeling amongst many current and former Labour members who feel that the party under Starmer has become increasingly authoritarian and blatantly intolerant of internal criticism. All of that, however, followed the resignation and defection to the Liberal Democrats last year of Andrew Tromans from the Labour Party, and the resignation of the Labour group's then deputy leader, Jodie Foster, who also quit her seat, triggering a by-election Labour then lost to the Tories mere months after winning it. So you have the resignations of Lowe, Cook, Drake, Denning, Edwards, Westwood, Tromans, Foster. 8 Labour councillor losses in less than a year have all left the Dudley Labour group in absolute tatters. Now, the 6 most recent former Labour councillors are preparing to form an independent group to challenge both the Tory-run council and the Labour Party. This new group now aims to provide a voice for those who feel disenfranchised by the current political establishment, and to advocate for policies that prioritise social justice and community welfare. The formation of this independent group is the latest in a trend of these groups that have been popping up around the country on councils and even in Parliament now, of course. This is a significant development in Dudley politics, though, as right-wing dominated as it has been for decades between the Tories and Labour there, because this is an area that is seen as the last bastion of the old-school Labour right. It represents a direct challenge to both, and it could potentially reshape the whole political landscape if these former Labour figures now choose a more progressive path, though that will need to be seen to be believed, perhaps, given the reputation Labour has in the Midlands for being so right-wing. You would think these are the very people who would be most on Keir Starmer's side in what he is doing, and yet they are not, and they are quitting over it. So imagine what the rest of the country looks like. Well, let's come on to that, shall we? The crisis in Dudley is not an isolated incident. I've drawn attention to it, but it is just part of a broader pattern of discontent within the Labour Party under Keir Starmer's leadership. It's all right looking at one council and me saying Labour crisis, of course, isn't it? That in itself might be considered a bit of a stretch. That kind of invites a little bit of justifiable criticism about this video, maybe. But it's not an isolated incident because it's happening across the country. Labour councillors and members are expressing extreme frustration with the party's direction right now. particularly its stance on what is blatantly austerity, despite the denials, amid their cuts to social security. Reports suggest that Starmer faces a potential exodus of councillors and members who feel that the party has abandoned its core values in pursuit of electoral success. Another example would be word that has come out of Doncaster City Council, that many of those standing for Labour there in this May's upcoming City Council elections, a council that has been under Labour control since 2010 at that, will resign the whip upon being elected from the party, all in protest over these social security cuts and cuts to disability benefits. The cuts to disability benefits in particular have been a source of deep moral and political controversy and have been very, very uncomfortable for a great number of elected Labour figures around the country. Because for many of these people, these cuts represent an absolute betrayal of the most vulnerable members of society and a total departure from the principles of solidarity and compassion that have traditionally defined the Labour Party, are amongst those measures that the party is built on. The fact that these cuts have been supported by a Labour government, Labour in name only as it is under Starmer, has left many members and supporters feeling disillusioned and betrayed, quite justifiably so. We should hardly be surprised when even elected officials, therefore, even in a right-wing Labour heartland, are saying enough is enough. Complain and they face expulsion after all, as they saw last month. Those in Dudley certainly know that. The crisis in Dudley and the broader challenges facing the Labour Party around the country under Keir Starmer's leadership, because of Keir Starmer's leadership, should serve as a call to action for all of those who care about social justice and progressive politics, because you can't back this party the way it's being run now. It is not enough to simply lament the state of the Labour Party and hold your nose and keep voting for them. What is that going to change? What is that going to achieve? Labour is dead. And if Keir Starmer continues to mislead it and turn it ever more Tory, and given the state of those he ensured were selected to Parliament, even getting rid of Starmer at this point may not be enough to save the party. And fundamentally, more people may reach the point, as I have, in believing that Labour is now the biggest obstacle to everything it was supposedly built on and supposedly stands for. And it now needs to fall for progressive alternatives to now cut through that this country desperately needs. It isn't just at home here in the UK that Starmer may be facing a massive headache, though, deserved as it is. He might be heading for the dock soon enough if all of the arms sales, intelligence flights for Israel and political cover he has given to them as well ends up seeing him charged with aiding and abetting in the genocide of Gaza, and with a brand new coalition of lawyers operating worldwide having assembled in order to prosecute those who have supported Israel from afar. Is Keir Starmer going to be in their sights now? Check out all the details of that story in this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you have not already done so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, whilst also supporting the channel at the same time, which is very much appreciated. And I will hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.